Hey songwriters, if right now you're struggling with melody, lyrics, structures, production, rhyme, or anything that is songwriting, then you're in the right place. I'm going to teach you in this video how to go about crafting a great verse that sets up the rest of your song, that impacts listeners and keeps them engaged for the entire length of the song. My name's Danny Boyle, I'm the founder of Songwriters International. We've helped exactly 3,115 songwriters develop their craft, write great songs that then they can release and go on to monetize in the world. Now in this video, as I say, I'm going to walk you through one of the keys of songwriting. If you unlock this, you're well on your way to writing a great song, and that is a verse. A verse oftentimes is overlooked in the songwriting process. Everyone's focused about the hook and the chorus. But never mind getting to the chorus. If you don't have a verse that can actually set the scene, nobody's going to end up listening to your chorus, unfortunately. Now the great thing about what every genre on this planet has in common is they all have a verse. They all have a verse to set the scene. Whether you're writing country, rock, pop, funk, folk, or anything else in between, they all have a verse, and that's why we're going to go through this and share with you the backbones of how to go and craft a great verse for your songs. Now as I'm saying, the verses are absolutely crucial. Let me give you this example. A listener comes into your song. The first thing that they're welcomed with is a verse. They're going to come in, they're going to hear the story, they're going to see how the scene is actually set, and if you don't do it correctly, then unfortunately the listener's never going to actually get to the chorus. They're never going to go any further, so they're going to go here and then they're going to go straight back out of the song. That's why a verse is absolutely crucial and cannot be overlooked. Imagine it like this. The verse is the first impression of your song, a little bit like if you were going on a date with somebody. The way that they look, the way that they speak, the way that they conduct themselves is ultimately the first impression. And if we don't create a good first impression here, then nobody's going to go and listen to the rest of our song and the duration of a 3, 4, 5 minute song that we've created. So the big thing I want you to take away from this right now at this moment in time is that the first impression is the verse. So how do we actually create a good first impression of our song? Well, here we go. First of all, we've got to set the scene. We've got to actually build some imagery, or as I like to say, paint the picture. I'm going to give you some real life examples of this and some examples now that I've just created as well for you and this video. So let's say for this example, we were writing a song expressing our love to somebody and that we've been feeling this love for a very long time towards them, maybe even years, but we've always been too afraid to actually tell them. So here's 4 possible directions that we could take that verse with that example. First and foremost, we could actually talk about how they first met. Where did they meet? What was the scene? Paint that picture. Were they friends from high school, or did they meet when they were 18? Get specific, paint the picture, set the scene. Or we could also talk about how she makes me feel, or how she makes this person in the song feel. She lights me up. You know, actually again, set the scene, paint the picture. How does she make me feel or make you feel? And get specific. She makes the blood rush through my veins. Right? Just something simple like that. It builds imagery. The rushing and through the veins lets someone imagine it in their head. She makes the sun crack through the rain. You can also talk about how hard it is to suppress the feelings. How hard it is when she is in front of me or in front of you. How hard it actually is to walk that tightrope. You could literally say lyrics like that. It's like I'm walking a tightrope and I'm so close to falling and flooding out the words of how I feel, or something like that. I'm walking the tightrope of friendship, or something again like that. Again, creating imagery of the tightrope, and the listener can see that, and it paints imagery around the lyric. We could also talk about what the feelings are. What are the feelings to us? How do we feel? And these two kind of interlink. The how she makes me feel and what are the feelings. So you could interlink them two together. But what we're going to do for this example, we're actually going to go with this one. We're going to go with how they first met. And we're not necessarily going to talk about all of these things, because this is the problem a lot of songwriters make, is they try and talk about all of these things in one verse. But what we would traditionally do is take one section like this, how they first met, and that's going to be one section of our verse. So verse 1. What we would normally do is take something like how they first met, and that would be our first verse. We don't want to overload the listener with a lot of lyric and lots of things to try and remember. How they first met, how then she makes this person feel, how hard it is to suppress the feelings. It's going to overwhelm the listener so much because they've got so much to try and remember what's going on. They're going to go from how they met at high school to next thing how hard the feelings are to suppress, and then how she actually makes me feel. All of that stuff is just a little overwhelming. What we would normally do is take that as verse 1, maybe take this as a verse 2, and then we've got 2 sections of our song which are going to tell different things. Okay, so here's example 1, where we are talking about being afraid to tell someone that we've known for a very long time how we feel. Now on the chalkboard I said we were going to go down the route of how they met and how they come to know one another. So we start that straight away. Friends since we both took our first step. Sets a scene perfectly, paints a picture for the listener. We then go into the next section, which is pictures are the flashback. Or pictures are the flashbacks, it could also say, because we can't remember it entirely. Right? So basically saying, again, just solidifying the point that we've been friends since children, and we can't even remember some of the memories that we have because we were that young. That's how far we go back. And then we also solidify it again and we say called back home every night at sunset. That's how far we go back. And that's how we've set the scene. We've talked about being called back home at sunset, flashbacks with pictures and friends since we both took our first step. That's how we set the scene. That's how we build the imagery. Now another example could be talking about the urge to want to travel the world and see different cultures, and that is what our song is all about. Now for this example we could go in many different directions, but for this what we've got is first idea that we could go down is how long has this been an urge? How long has this person or have I wanted to take this adventure? Maybe it's been something that I've been suppressing for a while, but I'm ready to go. So it's maybe been 5 years of reading magazines and looking on the internet, but now I'm ready to go. Or we could talk about what it would be like or what my expectations of it are. What do I expect it to be? What do I expect it to bring me in terms of fulfillment or excitement or happiness? What do I expect out the other side? Or where would I like to visit? We could start the verse straight away with building the imagery of the places that we would actually like to go. But we wouldn't necessarily talk about all of these things in one verse. Again, we would maybe take this one and then we might take this for verse 2, how long this has actually been an urge. So what we're going to do for this, we're actually going to take this one, which is where I would like to visit, and we're going to build that as verse 1 to build the imagery, because there's some really cool things that we can do. Now here's example 2 where we're talking about exploring the world and venturing out there to see what we want to see. Now as I said on the chalkboard, and what we said we were going to go with is actually explaining where we want to go, and that's how we start it. We say sunsets in Malibu, train rides to downtown Tokyo, hitting 60 across the Gold Coast, no tears of I miss home. Right, straight away, we set the scene with where we want to go. Sunsets, and we say Malibu. We say about train rides to downtown Tokyo. We say hitting 60 in a car across the Gold Coast. And then we really solidify it, just in case the listener was saying, oh, what's this about? Then we just say, no tears of I miss home. Which in there you can see we talk about Malibu, Tokyo, Gold Coast, which is Australia. So we're talking about exploring, and that's what the listener's going to understand. And then we solidify it with that last line. So now what we're going to do, we're going to look at some real life examples. We're going to start with this song. It's called Walking in Memphis. It's one of my favourite tracks, and it's a song by Mark Cohen. So if you haven't heard it, I suggest you go and give it a listen. But as we dive into the verse, you can see what it does is it actually builds out the imagery of boarding the plane, going to Memphis. And that's what that talks about in verse 1. It could talk about a whole different host of things. It could have talked about packing the suitcase at home. Or it could have talked about actually booking that initial flight and going on that journey. Or it could have talked about how long they've always wanted to go to Memphis. But it doesn't do any of that. What it actually talks about is boarding the flight and getting on that plane, a first class ticket. Now the second example that I want to share with you is the song by Ed Sheeran. It's called Castle on the Hill. Again, if you haven't heard this one, I suggest you go and listen to it. It's a great scene setter. It's a great image that it creates for verse 1. It's talking about this castle on the hill that Ed Sheeran actually always used to go to when he was a kid. Now what it talks about in verse 1, as you can see, is actually building the imagery of what it's like on this castle and some of the memories that Ed Sheeran first encountered when he went there. He talks about breaking his leg when he was 6, rolling down the hill. And you as the listener, what that does is it creates imagery in the head. It lets you actually imagine being there. It lets you imagine seeing it happen. And by doing that, we are then going to increase the chances as the songwriter to keep the listener there until the next part of the song, which is the chorus and the verse 2, and anything that then is ongoing thereafter. But what it does very well, like I say, is it chooses a particular section of what it wants to talk about. He wants to talk about the memories of this particular place, and then he goes on and actually talks about it. The other side of it as well, he could have gone into verse 1 about how he's been so many miles away from this childhood memory. You know, I'm 5,000 miles away, wish I was back there where I broke my leg when I was 6, right? He could have gone down that route, but he didn't. He decided to actually put himself straight in. When I was 6 years old, I did this, which is incredible writing and also creates the image, like I say, very, very well. Now, I also want to share this with you. For me, it was absolutely crucial for my development as a songwriter, and how I looked at the process and how I looked at retaining a listener's attention. Let's suppose you had a song which was 4 minutes long. It might be 5 minutes, maybe your songs are 5-6 minutes long, or maybe they're 2 minutes. Doesn't really matter, but for this example, let's just say it's 4 minutes. Now, in that structure we have, let's say, a verse, a chorus, and then a verse 2. Now, your structure would be a little bit longer than that, but for simplicity, let's go with this. Now, the way that you want to see songwriting, the way that you want to see writing, is that just because you've got a 4-minute song does not mean the listener is actually going to stay that duration of the song. Now, you're probably saying, oh, Danny, well, I know that. But a lot of the time, just because we've got a 4-minute song, we make the assumption that the listener's going to make their way through it. What we want to do is dissect it into sections every single time, right? So each section of our song, our verse, our chorus, and our verse 2 are all designed to just keep the listener until the next section. So in this verse, like the Ed Sheeran or the Walking in Memphis track or any others that I write myself, I'm using this theory that my verse is designed just to get me into the chorus, to keep the listener there and keep their attention. And then I can introduce my hook, and then I can keep them to the next section, which is verse 2. And as long as you dissect it into section by section, rather than just a drawn out long piece, 4-minute piece of work, you'll instantly change the way that you write your lyrics and your melodies. Because oftentimes I've done it myself where I just overlook a lyric and I'm just like, okay, that can go in there because it just works. But the reality is, seeing it from the other side, is that listener gonna keep engaged with that particular lyric, the way that I'm saying it? Does it really set the scene? Does it build the imagery in the way that I want? Because if it does, I've got the greater chance of taking them into the next section. And then when they've gone from there, then into this section over here. And the other way that you can look at it is a little bit like watching a movie. Let's suppose you had a 2-hour movie, not a 4-minute song, but a 2-hour movie. Just because it's 2 hours, it doesn't mean that you're going to retain the attention of the viewer for that duration. It's what happens in the movie. The first 10 minutes, then the next 10 minutes, and then the next 10 minutes. It's all put into sections so that we're going to increase the chances of actually watching the rest of the movie. And another example and practical way to look at it is, let's suppose you were watching a series on television, Netflix or something like that. It's got 4 episodes per one series. So we've got 6 times 4, we've got 24 episodes of this documentary or thriller that we are watching. Just because we've watched 3 or maybe even, let's say, 4 episodes, we've watched one series, it doesn't mean that we're going to go and watch the rest of the series, does it? We're only going to go back and watch the rest if it's actually engaging us, we're finding it interesting and wanting to continue on with what's happening. And that's the same way with our song. If we're writing a song, just because it's 4 minutes long, 5 minutes, does not mean that the listener's going to continue after 30 seconds. So as long as you dissect it into pieces and you understand that theory, you'll instantly start seeing songwriting from a different perspective. So I hope you've enjoyed this video all around writing a verse and how we do that and how we can create more imagery and make our verses more interesting to retain a listener's attention. So go ahead, if you haven't already, drop us a subscribe for more videos just like this. That would be very much appreciated, and it makes me understand that what what we're creating is valuable to you. I've also got a completely free one-to-one strategy songwriting call available in the description below. If you want me to speak with you one-to-one about your songwriting and actually take some of this stuff and implement it more personally to what you're doing in your genre, then go ahead, book that call. Let's jump on that and we can see what's going on with your writing and see if I can possibly help you with that side of things. So I've been Danny Ball here, founder of Songwriters International. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you over on another.